We are live. The meeting has come to order. Pledge of allegiance. Flag right behind you. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Alrighty. I'm gonna go out of order a little bit. Melanson Heath is here to discuss the draft of the what am I gonna call it, the audit, basically, or the annual audit.
Yes, the annual audit.
And so without further ado, I'll just turn it over to you.
All right, well, thank you for inviting me in. My name is Patrick Mohan. I'm a manager with Melanson, Heath and Company. I oversaw and supervised the audit as it stands for June 30th, 2016. There's a couple primary things that we're going to be going over here tonight. Mostly the timing of this document, based on that we're almost to the year end of the other. And then a couple of components in the audit that are both really good numbers as they stand, in an area that I think is a one-time issue that I really wanted to discuss prior to actually finalizing it, so that you were aware that it does differ from the prior year. Without further ado, if we can go to the first page, it's without a number, and I'm gonna go over and you can stop me as as you have questions. It's the independent auditor's report. And just gonna hit, I jotted down some lines. The draft was handed to the town approximately 3/4 of the way through April, which typically is quite a drag. When the year ended June 30, 2016, we're already almost a year later. Well, what went into that? There was a couple different things. You had your treasurer that left. You eventually had a tax collector that left. You had a consultant that came in. You then transferred to a full-time position. In the interim, some of the cash had to get reconciled, tax receivables. There was also a minor issue with Trio as concerning tax liens, for us being able to prove that out. And that was more of a system, that wasn't a personnel issue, that was a system issue with Trio that finally got fixed in the January, February timeframe. That being said, we eventually started our field work in the late November timeframe. And from there, we had questions and answers, and here we are today discussing a draft. And one of the biggest things that came out of here, and that is different, is when we're comparing the budget versus actual. Typically, that budget is broken down by the key components of your revenue sources. That would mean your property taxes, and then your other local revenues. The other local revenues are going to be your state monies, intergovernmental, your license and permits, your charges for services, miscellaneous revenue. The difficulty that we had was that we didn't have a budget breakdown of those other local monies. We have the actuals that were recorded in Trio, but the budget wasn't entered in there. Through research and some other questions and answers, that document we could not locate. So what you're gonna see in this report is the property tax number, a budget, and then you're gonna see in other local sources with an actual, and you do have a positive variance because of a couple of key areas, but I'm not gonna be able to tell you which areas were over or under local sources, which is different than in prior years.
So correct me if I'm wrong, just like we budget expenses for all our departments,
Yes.
as a town, we should be budgeting our revenues
Correct.
by all the different sources.
Correct.
Whether it be property tax, whether it be ambulance revenue, whether it be, all these different revenues, we should be budgeting those in our process, is that correct? And that's why and we did do the other revenues?
You did the other revenues to get to the point of what you needed to bill out and collect for property taxes, but we just couldn't get the breakdown. And it wasn't recorded in the Trio system, so it's
they put
not.
a number in there, and that's basically for commitment, so you have to, just to let you understand is Laura and I are brand new.
Okay.
She's been a town clerk for 15 years.
I was
As
here for 15 years.
Here.
Okay.
So she's got a lot more experience. I have zero experience. but I have financial experience,
Mhm.
so I have a financial background, so, so I don't, so like commitment, I've never done one, I don't know. So, but my guess is that on the commitment, we have to know expenses and revenues.
Correct.
When we come in our taxes, we have to figure out how much we're gonna get in revenue to figure out what we have to, what our mill rate is, all that kind of stuff. And they
Right.
just lump that number together without giving it a breakdown that you guys would use, is that correct, or,
I believe that
or close?
certainly the expenditures were calculated. Then there was a calculation of what those other local revenues were projected to be. But the question is where that document is. Because from there you had to get to a number of what you needed for property taxes. And what I'm saying is that unlike prior years, we could not locate that document or what that breakdown was.
Okay.
At some point you had to get there because you had to calculate what the property tax number was going to be.
Right.
But what we're not gonna see in the report is the breakdown of that number.
Okay.
The actuals were certainly recorded in there, and I believe going forward, the budgeted revenues are gonna be recorded in Trio, as well as the budgeted expenditures, so you will have that going forward, so, you know, this is gonna be a one-time
So that was for the year that ended,
June 30, 2016.
So what you're talking about is everything prior to that.
the budgeted amount would have been done in the end of 15, correct?
Correct.
When they did the commitment.
So is that what you're talking about?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, as far as the timing of that, all those decisions were done. You came forward in 2016 with your expenditures
That
budgeted.
wasn't last year's board, it was the previous year's board that actually didn't do that. Okay.
Where the
Because that was
document is
15.
located.
Yeah, typically the treasurer, like I did the revenues for this last commitment, I do like a more conservative approach, cause you never know like exactly what's gonna come in. But it should be broken down, like what you're gonna get from excise tax, what you're gonna get, like everything is broken down.
But yeah, you haven't looked at, or have you already looked at what we've done the current fiscal year?
We have not looked at the current
Okay.
fiscal year.
Okay.
We were focusing and trying to.
No, that's fine.
And certainly, we certainly have prior year, from an audit standpoint, we have prior year comparisons that we can look at your actuals just to make sure from a trend standpoint, things aren't out of normal. And that's where I can say that of your positive result, budgeted revenues as compared to actuals, there was a couple of key areas. But then when we get to the other line items, they're not in here because I don't know the breakdown and I don't wanna just.
No, understood. And Jordan, you looked for that and you couldn't find it?
I couldn't find it, I did look, but I couldn't, and it's not saying that they didn't do it, but there's just.
It just, you have to can't, yep, understood.
Right, I think
Right.
the document just couldn't be located, there was a bunch of different ways we tried to get to that. Because really didn't wanna go forward with this document without it, because it's
Right.
important.
Right.
But at some point you have to.
You have to draw the line somewhere, yep.
Right, and that's where we are today, so
Okay.
we're at a draft point and we're gonna go through the draft, because there aren't any, as far as I'm concerned, there aren't any other adjustments that have to be done to this, other than the board signing off on a management representation letter, which you can send tomorrow. And that would officially date the financials and it would be considered done
Okay.
at this point.
Okay.
So, I'm gonna continue through, and then, if you have any questions, please stop me, especially if there's anything that, you would like to hear further, because I'm just gonna hit the key areas. And first and foremost, we're all in draft, but our opinion of the town's financial statements at this point, even with the budget, is considered a clean opinion, meaning that's the best opinion that you can get. These financial statements are being reported in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. So all your governmental accounting standard board statements for pension liability, accrual-based accounting, the reporting methods are all being done in here. So in our opinion, these financial statements are in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, first and foremost. So on pages 4 through 9, that's considered the management's discussion and analysis, and that's a summary of the numbers that we'll go over. It has important information, but it's really a top level, it's a summary, and we'll go into some more detail. So if we can turn to page 10, please. Page 10 is your statement of net position. This is the long-term outlook for reporting, meaning that it's also on an accrual basis. So it takes all the funds, it puts them into one column called governmental activities. In addition to, the years before, the rescue is now being reported in the governmental activities. In the prior years, it was separated out as an enterprise fund. So this report also has that little bit in it as well. And this is also where your fixed assets are gonna be recorded, as well as your long-term liabilities, which is your capital lease and your net pension liability. So it differs from the fund basis, what we're gonna talk about. Really, the two key numbers here is about 2/3 of the way down. Your current portion of long-term liabilities, the capital leases of 33,000. While it's not a big number, the significance is it's the only long-term, and it's now considered a short-term liability on your books. So the town as a whole is very good standing because you don't have any notes payable out there, you don't have any bonds. You have your fixed assets that you've purchased and own, and you have them outright, outside of this 33,000. So that's a very good item to see. Bond agencies like to see that, credit agencies, when they're looking at the town's financial statements, that's an important line item. You may have fixed assets, but what other debt is associated with that fixed asset? Well, you don't really have any.
Correct.
The next is the number right below it, the net pension liability. The net pension liability is fairly low, and that is a number that is passed down from the state. The state had a unfunded liability, and it's been required to pass down the town's proportionate share as a member of the Maine's retirement system. And what that's saying is it's based on the amount of payroll that you have in town, because you're paying based on payroll, and it passes down your proportionate share of that unfunded liability. And overall, as compared to other communities, you know, you're in line based on payroll. So that isn't that's not an auditor's number, that's not a management's number, that's a number that's being passed down to actuaries. And I can say that, you know, as compared to, you know, other states, typically this number is a lot higher. So the state of Maine is doing very well as compared to, say, the state of Massachusetts, which is broken up by county levels, and then as compared to the state of New Hampshire. So that number in itself is also a very good number to have as far as a low liability.
How does that liability get realized? In other words, I mean, you have a liability in the books, whether it be a loan, whatever, you don't have to pay the loan back. When, is this just like, we never end up paying this back? Is this just this kind of, we always just sits on our books?
It is it's an accounting number, because it will go down as you're paying, and you'll continue to do what you do as far as your retirement payments. You're gonna continue. Eventually, depending on the retirement system's investments and how they do, this number will eventually be passed down as a lower figure, because they've been on track to have this fully funded. So the town's never gonna cut a check for this particular number. So it works differently than your normal
So
liability.
it's purely just an accounting, so if they had to pay out all of their liabilities right now for the pension, the state doesn't have enough money, they have to come to us for this, but that would never happen, obviously, but that's essentially what.
That's essentially what it is.
What it is, okay.
What it is.
Right.
So, yeah, and from that standpoint, it is more of an accounting number. It has to be reported on the face of the financial statements at this point. But it's, like I said, at the statement of net position, it's at the what we consider the government-wide presentation, where all of your funds are put together, and we're looking at this as an entirety. The last piece, if you look down, it's the second number from the bottom, the unrestricted net position, 2.8 million. That's up from the prior year, meaning that overall, again, on a accrual basis, the town is very much in line. And that's really related to a lot of like I said, you don't have those long-term liabilities of capital leases and bonds payable. It's a very stable outlook. If we can turn the page to page 12. Page 12 is more familiar looking, because it's your balance sheet. It's comprised of 3 different columns, the general fund, the permanent fund, and then the non-major governmental funds. The permanent fund is your trust funds, and your non-major governmental funds are your special revenue funds, primarily. our focus is gonna be on the general fund. 2 lines down in the general fund is your property taxes of $621,000. That's a slight increase from last year. But at this point, everything is either considered a current property tax or has been leaned. And it's fairly consistent if you look over a 3-year period. Your turnover of receivables is very good. Because not everything is gonna be collected, and with it being leaned, the town is secure in eventually collecting those funds. The other key number, is 2 key numbers. It's 2/3 of the way down. It's called your committed fund balance number. It's $106,848. That represents your capital reserves. And that's up from last year. Last year's balance in capital reserves was $34,000, so you're at $106,000.
Explain that number a little bit more. What do you mean by capital reserves? I mean, I guess I don't quite understand what that number means.
That means the monies that would be considered trust funds that have been set aside through basically taxation are put into the general fund. However, they have to be separated out.
Okay.
So that's why it's in a committed versus the unassigned number right below it. The unassigned number of $2,434,538. So it's a separation of monies.
But the trust, I thought was part of the permit, so I have trust assets in the general fund as well, then is what you're saying?
Yes.
They're like capital improvement ones.
Is that what those are?
Right.
The capital reserve funds,
Not,
gotcha.
like the trust funds that are set aside, and I think that I read it through the.
So those are the actual, what we call capital reserve or capital improvement funds, okay,
Sorry.
alright, no, that's fine, understood.
Right, and the permit is more for cemeteries,
Yep.
that type of.
Yep, okay.
And it's just a distinction in here because of accounting practices, it has to be included with the general fund. So it's separated out so that when you look at that unassigned fund balance, that is your liquid balance to be able to use towards projects and things like that.
Okay.
As a measure, that number is typically looked against the expenditures. And when you consider the expenditures, and it's on the second page, but please don't turn, the expenditures was 8 million, your fund balance is representative of 30%. Now that's very good. You know, that means that while that capital improvement fund might be considered low on some, meaning set aside, you're offsetting that by the fact that you do have liquid monies that you can be able to utilize at any given point, given the vote. And it's at 30%. A lot of times that can be at, depending on the way the town looks at things, can be as low as 5%, as high as 18 is typically a broad range. It depends on your budgeting and how you like to fund things. But you're certainly in a very good spot. And that's up 10% from last year, meaning that number last year was just over 1.5 million. So the town.
That's the unassigned?
That's the unassigned. So overall, that's a very good positive result during that year. And that's gonna be, and we'll talk about that in a second, how you got there.
Okay.
But overall, over a 3-year period, that unassigned number has been going up.
Yep, good, okay.
So if we can turn to the budget versus actual page, which is on page 16. Because page 16 is really, it is the report card of the town. It is taking your original and final budget against your actuals, and it's weighted against making sure that whatever you budgeted for in the year, that's what those expenditures are going against. That way there's no auditor adjustment or type of generally accepted accounting principle adjustment for financial reporting. This is just really getting apples to apples when we look at these things, and it's far right hand column, the variance column, the final budget, positive and negative is just that. A positive number is non-bracketed, and a negative is either gonna represent a deficit or overspending. And what we were talking about at the very beginning, when you look at the revenues and other sources, you only have 2 lines, the taxes and the other sources. typically that's broken out further. The other sources number, the budget number of 1.3 million is typically broken out further so that you can see on a more of an incremental level how you did in those categories when you're breaking it down.
Understood.
To the far right, when we look at that, you had a positive result of 617,938. Now, there were a couple key pieces in there that we looked at from a trend point, meaning your motor vehicles were up about 130,000 over what the actuals were for last year. And that's what we're seeing as far as the economy's getting better, people are buying, newer vehicles, it's gonna cost a little bit more. So that trend is equal to what we're seeing. And then the other big piece was considered a miscellaneous revenue, and that was a fairly large amount that was passed back from the state retirement system back to the town that represented credits. That was about 223,000, so
It's a one-time.
that's a one-time, which means that when you look at it from that standpoint, you take the 617, you're still 400,000 in the plus as far as beating your revenues, which is still good. I jotted down some revenues from the prior year. 617, that number, I'm sorry, in the prior year, that 617,938 positive result was 226,000. That would be 2015, and in 2014, it was just over 90,000. So again, even taking out the one-time revenue, the town still did very good at beating that budget, but we just didn't have the breakdown as to really what was driving it. And that's why it's an important thing, is well, what's driving that positive result?
When we do our budgeting, for this coming year, and again, I'm not even sure, we don't even know where this year is gonna end, but economy still seems good. Is there a rule of thumb as far as our budget? I mean, we could go with what we had last year if we have those numbers, or the current year, or how do we, when we're doing this as a budgeting, is there a rule of thumb? Is it just a feel? Is there?
Well, certainly there's a feel to it, and there's also being, conservative outlook. And then the other thing would be looking at your prior year. Typically your budgeting process you're doing in the tail end of the year, coming into December, January, and you at that point can start looking at, well, what are our actuals as compared to those budgets? I mean, some things are seasonal, so you have to take that into account, and other things are kind of more consistent. So if at the halfway point you're consistent, then that would be the rule of thumb to probably be consistent the next year and maybe not raise that outlook for that type of revenue. And then certainly have to be aware of the seasonal type of stuff. That can fluctuate. That's probably one of the harder ones to manage, because you kind of have to have an idea of, nobody has a crystal ball, but you have to kind of have an idea as to what to expect.
Do we already have budgeted numbers for these for the fiscal 18?
That would be when we do this commitment, I'll do that, so we have it for fiscal.
So I guess, because you talked about towards the end of the year, which is kind of like the regular budget, which we do for expenses, because we have to get that voted on.
Correct.
But the revenue side, as far as I know, never really gets done, because they don't do that until commitment. Because that's the other side of trying to figure out how much we have to charge for property taxes and the mill rate. And that happens, they probably don't even look at that until after the year is
I mean, it
done.
was almost September when we did it,
They did the commitment last year in
in
September.
September, yeah.
So, again, what I'm saying is that like for the current year, even though all the expenses, they've gone through a budgeting process, and the people have voted on it, the revenues that we're gonna use for the commitment haven't even probably been looked at. Am I correct in when I say that? I mean,
Yeah.
we certainly have, the other board didn't look at revenues, right?
No.
Right, so,
So at the time you're building those expenditures is the time to be looking at those revenue sources coming in, meaning how they will be paid outside of property tax. And then at that point, it's kind of, again, historically looking at, it's like, well, there's an expectation that we'll be able to collect X amount in motor vehicles, boat, other permits, part of that is gonna come through the planning and zoning type of processes, maybe there's not a lot of big businesses moving in, but maybe there is, that's the time to look at those expenditures and say, what is going to offset those?
Right.
That's the time to,
Like the ambulance revenue too, that's another
Right.
thing that you look at, whatever fees we get, that all
But I'm
goes
just
into
saying,
that
I don't
number.
think quite frankly, I don't think that's ever happened in this town, looking at revenues before. I mean, I've been on the budget committee for a long time, you've been on the budget committee for a long time. Revenues on the budget committee has never really been looked at. We look at ambulance revenues just because we figure it's gonna offset part of the fire and rescue budget. But all these other excise tax revenues, the whole big budget for the town revenues is never necessarily looked at.
But during the commitment is really when they
That's
look
when they
at
look
that,
at it, yeah.
and they look at the numbers and, okay, say
Because I'm not-
say it's $1 million for excise tax, okay, we're not gonna count on that. Maybe it was $1 million last year, but we're not gonna count on that because you can't.
right,
You've gotta, like Jordan said, be conservative, because you don't wanna say 1 million, because you're punching that into the commitment to lower the taxes.
right.
So you better make sure,
Well, and that's why I'm saying if you project a number at the beginning, by the time you're coming around to, now you've got something to weigh against to see, from, I don't wanna say to justify to anybody, but you'd be able to say, well, we're at the halfway point, 3/4 of the way point, this is what we thought
Yeah.
coming into it, here where we are, we need to lower our estimate because, that didn't happen, or maybe there's a timing difference of that
and I
project
think
going
we've
on.
always gone low.
Well, in looking at
Lower.
things, that would show that you're being conservative.
Yes,
Right, cause I know if we were to exceed, we'd actually have to go back to the people for money, even though none of the budgets went over. Is that correct? In other words, if let's say we budgeted way too much and those never came in.
Right.
And let's say all the departments that you have here, expenses came in right on the nose. So now we're in a negative,
Right,
which this comes out of the general fund.
correct.
Is that just where it comes out of? We don't have to, cause we didn't raise and appropriate more than what the people allowed for because none of those items went over budget. As far as on the expense items, cause we don't ask the voters to approve a revenue number.
Correct.
So so that just reduces our general fund.
It's going to reduce your general fund.
For the same reason why if we get more revenues, that it increases our general fund.
Correct, that's where the
Which is
617,
where this number comes from.
right, so part of that increase in that unassigned number was a direct result of this positive 617,000 going right back into it. The other component is just what you're saying is if we go all the way, second number from the bottom on the expense side, the departments had a turn back of a total of 291,594, a grand total of 909,532. So that's how that number has increased, both through that, certainly that one-time revenue, and then departments not utilizing full budgets. And again, this was a year where you had the rescue operations coming into the general fund too. But certainly, that's a cost, and those are things that are gonna have to be worked out as well, as far as, looking at that and things, and overall, that operation did well as far as the charges for services and monies coming in, so everything put together, the town had a good year. And that's how that number increased last year to this year, so, overall, a very good number to have. Very much better than going the opposite way.
Yep.
As we look then down the expenditure side, really most of the variances were all good. Insurances and salaries, some various things for public works as far as what, those positive results were. Certainly the transfer station, I believe as I'm going across, was waste management was part of the contract, that was the driving force behind that one. And then the others were small incremental, so again, overall, the town had a good year. But again, being able to break down that other source number to really know where it's coming from, it would be a good thing.
Yep, understood.
We turn the page, really, don't have a lot to say. This is the statement of fiduciary net position. And it represents your escrow fund, so it's really not the town's money, that's money that the town is holding on and may have to pay back based on the agreements in place.
Planning board, this would be planning board escrows and, okay.
The rest of the document, I'm not gonna go through unless you had a specific question on one of the footnotes, because there's a lot of good information in here, but it really then kind of breaks out some of the numbers that we just talked about. And from there, if we could go to the management letter. And overall, even certainly with the different changes, there was only one current year issue added. There was a couple, three prior year recommendations that we're gonna quickly speak on, but really there was only one current year recommendation. And we certainly had some other smaller items that we found and we've discussed as we went along the way. They just didn't reach the level to put into the written and documented management letter that we're seeing here. The first is from the prior year. It's been 3 years, I believe, improving the financial reporting in the accounting system. The current year status was, we noted a lot of significant improvement in the way the books were being maintained. We still were required to do some journal entries, specifically to the rescue fund and the special revenue fund to bring them into line. Now, part of that was also there was a transition period here too. But overall, we've seen significant improvement from when we started doing the audit and we're in year 3. But there's still room for improvement. So our recommendation is the township needs to continue to analyze the general fund and financial reports on a monthly basis, and making sure that it's not just a case of looking at the expenditures, it's really looking at the balance sheet and making sure all those accounts are in order at the end of the year, being able to go right down them and know what each one represents. And overall, we've seen significant improvement because we did far less journal entries than we've had, but we still had to do so.
Do you understand all these issues, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I believe we've discussed them.
And I've been in touch with Brian a lot too,
Yeah.
we're kind of all on the same page.
Well, I just wanna make sure that obviously, he's the one who implements a lot of this.
No, in our process, that really, as we bump into something, we like to talk about it right then and there so that it can be fixed or adjusted, and or we can talk about, well, maybe this is a year-end type of adjustment that the town should do, or maybe it's just will be considered an auditor adjustment, because depending on how you're sitting here and looking at monthly reports, it may be important to not do something at the present, but know that you have to do it as a year-end process. So it's important to discuss the matters as you go, instead of having a knee-jerk reaction or saying something at the end.
Okay.
The other one was improving controls over reconciliations, and those are over your major accounts. And really, it's kind of improving the timeliness of this, but again, it comes back into the transition process that was going on. And some of this is a yes or a no when we get to our questions as we're doing the audit. Was the cash reconciled at year end? Well, it did get reconciled at year end, but it was really considerably later. Is there a second set of eyes signing off on the bank reconciliations? That's something we like to see. It helps with segregation of duties and some other things.
You had mentioned that, correct?
Yeah, because we've never had that, there's been no segregation.
So how does that work in other towns? Is that selectmen that are doing it? Is it another employee that's doing it?
Again, it varies a little bit town by town depending on how many employees there are. But certainly the selectmen would be able to do that. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you are proven. It's a matter of being able to stop and ask the person, understanding the reconciliation. It doesn't necessarily take an accountant or a CPA to the point that you can ask a logical question of, well, those are items, well, how come they're still there, or, well, what does that mean? And being able to learn in the process of doing it, being able to understand it, and then signing off that, yes, it's being done timely. And the items that are here do make sense, meaning your standard outstanding checklist, your standard, maybe a deposit in transit, something that was recorded but doesn't get to the bank the next month. The reconciliation should be standard enough. There shouldn't be any odd type of things looking at it, on it. And if there are, that's the time that somebody can ask. Now, we didn't have any problems with the cash reconciliations. It's just more of a best practice to have that second set of eyes, being able to sign off on it on a monthly basis, and just having that done. So it would depend on certainly availability, but it doesn't take, I guess, an expert to be able to do that. It does take somebody to ask a question of like, well, what is that? Okay,
Basically what it is a double check on me.
it is.
Okay.
It is, it's a standard process,
Absolutely,
but yeah, it's a double check and it's also a protection too.
absolutely.
Because if something should happen, it's a case, well, the town has these processes in place to make sure tax collections, tax receivables are reconciled, the bank's reconciled, you can see them, it's documented. So it protects the employee too, it does certainly check up, because there's this, limited employees, segregation of duties, meaning there's not enough. Doesn't mean you go out and hire someone, but it does mean that there's something being, there's oversight there, and the key point is it's documented.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
it's a win for both sides, as far as a control and also for the employee to know that somebody else is checking the work, they're signed off on it, a comfortability level there too.
Yeah.
So. The third was formalized policies and procedures. And certainly this is, this is coming from the prior year. Certainly there's different policies that we can certainly help with as far as, being, put a template out there. Certainly this is also a time issue because it's not something that can be just taken lightly when you wanna put out a cash receipts policy or an investment or a fund balance policy. There's certainly different ideas out there to be able to look at other towns and communities because they haven't listed on their website. So this is more of, again, probably a best practice so that if something that does occur, the town can look at and say, well, this is what our policy is. We didn't do anything wrong because this is the way we've laid it out. Versus if you don't have a policy, it does leave a lot of room for people to interpret as to how things should be done. So it's just, again, more of formalization, but it does take some time. It's not just, it shouldn't be just a, let's get something in a binder and sign off, so.
Yep.
And then our last.
I'll just let you know that is probably active. We're dealing with other things, but that certainly is at least that's on my list, that's probably on your list. As people coming in as an item that's not on the back burner as a priority, although everything is prioritized, but I am saying that's, that's certainly, fairly up there to get, standard procedures to do things.
Yeah, and like I said, it's not a quick one.
Yep.
And there should, there's gotta be.
There's a lot of plagiarism that can happen, because there's a lot of towns that do that, and actually, I was looking at some other stuff that, it's kind of funny, it was a mass gathering stuff, and I found an error, and that same exact error I found in several other towns, because you could tell they plagiarized, and the error just kind of went around.
I like to call it just recycling.
So, yep,
As long as you update the town, that's always a good.
That's right,
Good sign.
so, alright, cool.
We have one current year recommendation, and really that's improving the payroll oversight and documentation. So when we came in and we do our standard payroll testing in vendor, the biggest thing for payroll is that we're looking for signed time cards. And then we're also then looking for formal rate agreements so that we can be sure, because we take it from the respect that if we were brand new coming in and we needed to do the payroll for the town, well, how would we know what's in the system is correct? And that should be documented all the way through for each of the employees, in a manner that's quick enough to be able to go to their folder. It could also be in a way not potentially on an individual page. I've seen it where the current year rates are on one document and it's kept by, in a payroll folder, a master one, but it's easy enough to see that you can say that, all right, well, these are the approved rates. That's what's in the payroll module, we're all set. Well, in not all cases that we could see that. Now, we didn't think there was any issues based on what we were seeing and how things were being done, meaning that we don't think there's anyone that was overpaid or anything like that. But it should be formalized so that it's easy to see. And certainly, documented time cards is also another second set of eyes on the way things should be handled. So that was our one areas that, improving that area, so all departments, all employees that are time card
I have a
related.
question, so every employee who gets paid should sign off on their own card, is that what you mean, or do you mean the department head does it, or the?
Are these kind of cards, are these okay? This is what, do we use this for everybody?
Except for fire and EMS.
Yeah.
And I think that was where you guys were going with that, is fire and EMS is I get a spreadsheet
Yeah.
every week, but we don't get signed time
Yeah.
cards.
I wondered, I
And-
asked him about that too.
And there's also, what you're saying is there should be like, if we hired a new firefighter, there should be like a starting rate, and that should be on a piece of paper, so if somebody came in, they should see that. And that goes for highway and for everything, there should be like a starting rate, so we know, we've never had that here, we've never had any like set rates as.
Correct. And I would say the employee signs off on that as well as then the department head, maybe they don't have to sign off on the individual one. Again, a little bit of paper reduction, they can sign off on a master list, but then the supporting time card would be right behind it so
Right.
that they're signing off, or they can sign off on the individual.
Right.
Most sign off on the individual because it's just part of their process as the department head.
So they get a bunch of these and they can initial or whatever that they've
Yeah.
checked it off type of thing.
Yeah, exactly, and it helps, it's gonna help finance on the other end as far as whether there's vacation time or how time can, that's the time to catch those input errors that don't have to be done on the other side as well. So from an input side, it certainly helps because there's two sets of eyes checking it, so when it gets to finance, it's ready to be putting correctly. There's certainly still gonna be mishaps because everybody's human, but it does help that part of the process as well, so there's some time saving involved on both sides. And then from a documentation standpoint, it should be just easy enough to be able to go in and look at an employee folder and be able to see those types of documents.
You do a bunch of other towns in Maine?
This is really the only one that I do in Maine particularly.
Okay.
New Hampshire is more what I do.
Oh, okay, but you've done it, so I mean, are other towns using manual cards like that, are they using, where they actually punch it in? Are they using, what's used out there as far as tracking employee hours and things like that, is it more that?
It's more of a manual record. There's very few, your school departments will be where your electronic system is, and usually that is more of your custodians, and some of those others, teachers are all salary, so really they're signing off on a absentee type of memo. But no, most of your towns are still a manual system, they're really not gonna, unless you're into a city, and even those, they don't utilize an official time card electronic key-in system because some aren't at a computer. So we're not seeing a lot of that on the town basis, it's usually typically, whether it was the long punch card, you do see some of those, that's more of a DPW. You see the police and the fire, or typically the police, their charge codes are extensive as far as whether they're doing detail and some of the other things, so they have more of an electronic one that maybe they complete in Excel.
Right.
And then it'll get,
Just because it's complicated, but right.
Yeah,
But
and
it's
then-
still somewhat manual.
it's still somewhat manual, and then it goes on to really one cover sheet that maybe that the police chief, and that kind of goes to similar to fire, that's what we typically see. But your regular,
Roads, crews, DPW type of stuff, you can do either manual or actually a punch card.
yeah,
We don't really have like a center for necessarily, so.
no,
But manual would be, because do we get manual cards for the roads?
Yeah, but we only have 2 people there,
Oh, okay.
so.
and some will, they'll develop their own time card. And it's just, there's a master in the computer, and when they need more time cards, they just print them out, so it's not even a formalized book, and it has the spots, so, name, signature, the days, the hours, vacation, those types of things, so they can put in the information right there and then how many hours worked, how many vacation days used, and sign off, so it's a little less, than, filling it out line by line, it's already almost pre-printed. So, and then they go even further depending on how big, where that employee, that expense line, and that they typically get charged to. So again, when it gets to finance, there's no real guessing game. That shouldn't be the time to start kind of, what's being used here, things like that. It should already be laid out. So, that is the management letter. Those are, certainly, like I said, there were some smaller issues, but those were being discussed and also have to be taken into consideration, Jordan being new. You had a consultant that was an interim when we came on board, as far as to do the audit, the person that was there for the year, left. So a lot of our questions were taking, some extra time to be able to, where is it in the file? And, we've been doing the audit for a couple of years, so we had other sheets that we could say, well, this is what we're looking for and some other things, but, overall, I think it was as good as it could be for a year with some transitions, so.
Yep. Okay, good.
And then if you're happy with the draft, the way it is, I can send that management representation letter to Jordan tomorrow, then this will be, it can then be bound and completed.
Anybody have any issues?
No,
Who am I to? I'm just saying, who am I to have issues? So, yeah, do we normally vote on that, or we normally make a motion? I make a motion that we, accept the draft as it is.
yeah.
All those in favor? There you go.
All right, fantastic. So,
I don't know if that's normally done, but it is now.
normally not, as far as, typically we have the exit conference after everything's finalized, but, in speaking with Jordan, I really wanted to make sure everyone was all set the way we were presenting.
No.
I kinda asked them to come in too, cause it was 2 new board members.
Yeah,
and
no,
everything
that's good.
that we've gone through.
Yep.
2 treasurers and then I got here, so I kinda wanted to.
No, and we're more than happy to come in at any point in time to discuss these types of things, and usually the same or similar presentation would be done after the final.
So then when do you guys normally come in for this current year that we're about to finish? When do you guys then normally wanna start auditing that?
Normally, there's the June 30th is the cutoff, or is the fiscal year end. At that point, there's still gonna be, the town is really still open for essentially a couple, 3 weeks as far as being able to make sure all the expenditures and everything's being dated to that.
Yep.
And then after that, you get your time to do your bank reconciliations. So it's really kind of, typically the August timeframe is usually where most towns would be as far as getting done, as far as what, a goal or a date. And then at that point, it's calling Jordan to ask how things are going, are the books being closed, make sure that there wasn't any hiccups, because like I said, it's not a case of just, in my mind, it's not a case of just hitting the switch and we're all done. It's really going through ahead of time what those accounts are, because we're gonna ask the questions as to what that number means. So better to look at it before we do, and that way it's done, and or ask the question of, well, I see this number and I don't think it's right, all right, well, maybe we decide to look at that number during the audit. That wouldn't be considered a management letter comment, that's just a case of, he's got other things to do to be able to close out the books. We can put that type of question during the audit and be able to get it done when we're here, we can sit down at a table and kind of go over things. So, an August timeframe is the, like a projected date, that most people go with. But then you get into your vacations and things like that, so that impacts potentially the timeframe.
Right.
But that's when we would like to kind of come in and do things. But it's all predicated on a few moving parts.
Yep.
So,
Alright.
and I think we could get on a better timeline,
Yeah, that's fine.
so.
So the sooner we get that, the sooner we can make changes or corrections if we're failing in areas and
Well, that is the other thing,
instead of
because,
waiting a whole nother year and.
right, because as we look at this current year recommendation, I mean, we're just talking about it, so that, there's only 2 weeks
current year before it's,
Right, so like all these changes will be implemented really they're still a year behind.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
You know,
Yep,
but
I
then-
understand.
But that's also taken into consideration, so by the August timeframe, and I can tell you, by the August timeframe, if these things are being taken care of, even with the policies and procedures, as long as there's a path to it, and then the other ones are, being done, that's gonna show up in the current year status. Okay, at year end, it wasn't achieved, but in August, we did subsequent year end testing to say that, well, yeah, there's payroll, yes, there's time cards, there's these other things in place. That gets into the report.
Yep.
So it wouldn't be just a whole nother year to wait.
Right.
It would be documented that as of year end, it might not have been done. But as of August or September, when we come in for field work, we can certainly test those areas to say that, yes, things are being done. That it's just didn't sit there stale until the next year.
Good. Good, Paul? You awake?
Yeah.
Okay. Questions, anybody?
No?
Anything else for us? You done?
I am done.
Cool.
As we're talking about things, I'll send the representation letter, and then there's, we also send out annual engagement letters as well. I believe a 3-year agreement was up, but we would still be at
Is that up, June 30th?
Would have been up June 30th last year. So this audit was covered under that 3-year contract.
So you're kind of like out of contract right now, in a way?
No, not really, because what's being done here is I consider as part of the other agreement.
The contract is for like 3 audit years.
Yeah.
So when they finalize, then their contract's up.
Gotcha.
But
Gotcha.
we can
Okay.
certainly provide an engagement letter, we would charge the same price as we did last year.
Okay.
So there would be no increase, especially based on the timing, and we could do a 1 year. Certainly understand, don't like to see people go out to bid, but at the same time, we can handle it multiple different
And
ways.
this was your first 3-year engagement, is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So, that's just full transparency on my side. as
No,
far as what's going on.
There's a lot of value in having consistency. So you can see a trend rather than now 3 years later you change and then another 3 years, and because in 3 years you guys are probably just understanding how Lebanon works in a way.
It's typically a 2-year process.
Yeah.
The third year is, the first year is really getting our arms around the knowledge of the town, the employees, all the functions. The second year, all of a sudden now we certainly have the prior year and we can look at other years, but we can build our own trends as to then ask those questions. Well, why is that number going up? Why is that number going down?
Right.
What are you doing? And then by our third year, yes, can kind of come in with this type of analysis to say, this is where you're heading,
Right.
and you're heading in a good spot. And then typically, as far as the other question, people, well, when do you do it? That's a town by town. Some will go out every 6 years. Especially go out to bid to see what the numbers are to check our price. Like I said, I'm being fully transparent.
Yep.
At that point in time, do you make a change? Don't. There's time and cost associated with certainly the finance getting to know new auditors as well,
Right.
but that shouldn't be a deterrent from making those decisions. But that's typically the way things work.
Yep. Alright. Cool.
All right. Well, thank you very much for inviting me.
Yep.
You guys gonna go meet?
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What was the one before him? Was it
Smith.
Smith?
Yeah, Smith, I remember him. Is Bobby coming up today?
Huh?
Bobby coming up at 7?
Supposed to.
Okay.
Yeah, Smith, that's, I'd rather have him than Smith.
Oh, yeah. We got a few minutes until 7, so why don't you got paperwork for us?
Can we do this executive session? I mean, I don't know, policy or I don't know, I don't know what it is, but
Yeah, huh?
you wanna, okay.
Okay. Yeah, plus, cause like I gotta turn
Okay.
that off and then turn it on and
Okay,
yeah,
I
so
didn't know if it was
but that's fine. I had told him 7:30 anyways,
okay.
he just couldn't stay away.
Actually, I do that.
So and again, you probably have, yep, oh, you started with him, okay.
So these are all the appointment papers that need to be signed so that Dale can swear them in. We have a lot of signing.
Okay. I have to start now. All these are all for comprehensive planning committee? Is that what these are?
Comprehensive planning, there's one for planning board, I think there's some in there for, I think there's one in there for.
Oh, this is where, these are all these,
Yeah,
these are the
they
year end
usually
ones.
expire, yeah.
Oh. I thought these were comprehensive plan,
no,
these are all. So these are Dale, Georgie and Allen, Marcel Coletta, Jenny Collins, Carol Harris, James Below. James Below has
It's like.
several, plumbing, health, E911, code, building, Jordan, personnel officer, Dale, tax collector, and Amy as alternate planning board member.
the only question I have about the tax collector one is, this should really go by commitment. Tax collector, cause the taxes are committed to her. It wouldn't go on a yearly, could go a yearly appointment, but, I don't know when her appointment must run out now, but, cause the taxes are committed to her. That's what so, she's not done yet. Is what I'm saying is, the tax collector should go by commitment appointment, not by, like, when everybody else. That's all I'm saying, that I would like to see that get fixed at some point here.
It would be what, so again,
Her commitment, see, when we do the commitment,
hold on, why don't we, no, hold on.
well, no, if her appointment's gonna expire, we obviously are gonna have to appoint her, but I like to see
But we
that.
can do a short appointment to get us
Right.
through this commitment and then do it again.
Absolutely, because
That's what I'm saying,
because
so let's hold
for
off on
tax-
that.
for tax collector, it's a commitment. It's not like a year, it's still a yearly thing, but it's a commitment, cause they're committed to her. So, you know, it's a commitment, so I would rather
So
whenever.
it's basically from one commitment to the next commitment?
Yes, they're committed to you, to her
But
personally.
yet they don't have a definitive, our commitments don't have a definitive date.
No, it's whenever we get our act together.
So then,
Yeah,
So
so
then
it could
how-
be
how do you-
like
how do you-
August, it could be
but how do you word it?
September. Well, you just change the date to, you can almost figure it out, I'm not sure when they got committed last year, but see,
Well, last
she's
year
in
was
charge of
September.
leaning them too, she's gonna lean them.
Right, but last year they didn't do it until the end of September,
Mhm.
which is probably, if they had been doing this, that would have been way later than they would have normally done.
Usually, I think it used to go, they would usually commit till August, cause once they get leaned, they get turned over to the treasurer. So then she only has like, not that much left to collect, so a tax collector is a commitment. More so than just June 30th, like everybody else is, that's all I'm saying.
How come the Chiefs isn't in here?
That hasn't come up yet, I don't know.
So that's just a thought to change that to, and I don't know when she plans on leaning. Cause once she leans them and they go to lien, then they get turned to the treasurer. So then all that it's the treasurer's responsibility, so
Do you wanna talk to her about this
Yeah.
then and
I-
figure out,
I kinda did, I thought we, but yes, I will.
so we can figure out
What
how
the
to
date
put
is,
that over
yes.
here.
Yep. There we go, sorry. So Carol is now gonna be the ACO, is that what's happening?
Well, she was always, right? She was always.
No, she was the deputy, wasn't she?
Assistant.
The assistant, so now she's the full-fledged ACO.
Well, we don't have another one back yet. She hasn't come back, so she has to be.
Yeah, I don't know, I can go ask Dale.
Well, no, that's okay, I just wondered, so Mary isn't the ACO anymore, I guess, okay.
I know that when I called her, she had a doctor appointment yesterday, and then she was gonna get in touch with us to let us know.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, I mean, I did say, because, not Mary, Carol
Yeah.
had asked me, because she had heard a question about, I had asked when Mary was gonna be back, and she thought that it was in reference that I had a issue with her not handling the issues,
No,
that
no,
was.
no,
And I said, no, it was because of the phone stipend was
Right.
my concern, and I actually said for her to please share to Mary that we're not trying to make her come back earlier than she's actually
good.
wanted. In fact,
right.
she probably should have a doctor's letter stating that she's allowed to return. We should probably need that.
She was like, as soon as I can drive, I can come back and go to.
No, and again, that's the whole point, is she should not be pushing herself to come back to
Right.
work, so.
Exactly.
So I think that's fine for right now, and then I guess, cause we need to have one. That's
Absolutely,
probably
well, I
why-
just,
That's
that's why I
probably why
asked.
she did that, yep.
Okay.
Transfer station's not here yet, so I don't know, we'll continue. You had reached out to Bobby again?
Yep, I called, I asked him what time was better, either
Yep,
the 6
yep.
or the 7, he said the 7,
Alright.
so.
We will continue then, what else do you have for us?
Time off slips,
What are these?
time off slips. I don't get paid, I don't get paid for anything, so. So, cause I won't be here for the cleaning. And then the
Okay.
planning board.
Oh, these are, that's for that whole week is what you're saying, right?
Yes, yeah,
And Paul's Paul? Paul took off, he's okay with this?
yeah, he's always said it goes to, I usually don't
It's not
have
like
any
you get
time.
paid for this anyway.
Exactly,
So,
Yeah.
I mean,
What, the planning board?
no,
not
for vacation.
or anything.
Oh, right. No, I'm just saying is that if, I mean, they don't meet often. So my only concern is if
Yeah,
that's.
it wouldn't
if
be that week, so we're
So-
actually gonna be meeting the second Monday in July, so that would be the next time.
And then what do we do as far as on cleaning?
On clean, I don't know,
We
never done
just-
it before, I may be back to clean on Wednesday, I don't know, things got a little, we were supposed to not be back until.
I just don't know what
I mean, 1 week I don't think is gonna kill anything, but
Well,
that's
we
up
could
to
just
you.
ask them to, or I'll come take out the trash or something, I mean,
So, I mean, people's desks will have a little dust on them.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Like I said, I
sorry,
may
Paul, I cut you off.
be here, I may not for.
I get no respect.
I know that, Paul, I know, and I probably signed in your spot too.
Well, if you don't do that, then they won't.
Yeah, but I mean, we could pick up the trash and whatever, I mean, if there's a mess, you just gotta clean it up, right? We can make the new girl do it. She doesn't know any different, right? Oh, by the way,
Yeah.
under other duties.
Yeah, all the duties as assigns. And then this was-
You held that one back.
Yeah, get that done.
What else do you have for us? Is that what you're looking?
Yeah, decision on an application.
Decision on application.
Was this just something
This
that
was
had
the
to
new
be?
draft that
The
had,
new
that
draft,
you had
okay.
to do for the abatement.
Oh, yeah. So, we have the abatement, that was the blue folder and the red folder, to try to, so you won't remember the number if I told you the number.
Yeah,
But
I know
that
what you
that
mean.
one, you know.
Yeah.
Remember the blue folder and the red folder one? We never, I literally was shaving and I had a panic attack that we didn't send a letter out, we didn't.
Mhm.
I'd done the draft, but we never actually got around to.
Yeah, you said
so-
you're gonna, yeah,
So that's what this is.
okay.
There's no, his information isn't on here.
Mhm.
She'll get the address and mail it to him tomorrow, but I wanted this to be.
Yep.
And basically, it's, I did a short analysis, it's approved, it's not,
Mhm.
I think a bigger analysis sometimes is more needed if it's denied than if
Yep.
it's approved, so, Is this, oh, gotcha. This is just a previous one that we had done that I had scrapped.
Is Bob maybe outside and he's not coming in because the door's closed? No?
Nope. Do you know his number by chance?
I can probably get it.
You don't know it, you'd have to, do you know his number,
Right.
Bobby?
No. Oh, sorry, wrong way, sorry, Jen.
Right, and then the last thing we had was just that the public hearing for the Board of Appeals was gonna be held. I don't know if you wanted to mention that.
Just, it's gonna be in the newspaper, there's an appeals board meeting on the 26th, it's in the newspaper, it's gonna be on the website, but it's just an added way to get the information out, if you don't mind reading that since you're on camera.
Town of Lebanon, Maine Board of Appeals is holding a public hearing on Monday, June 26th, 2017. The public hearing will be held at the town office conference room, which is located at 15 Upper Guinea Road at 6 p.m. right here live. Arvids O. and Shelley Sanborn of 58 Hubbard Road, map U05, lot 002, have requested a public hearing for a setback variance. The Board of Appeals is Betty Harris Howard, Roland Demers, Bernard Lebrec Jr., Jennifer Bozak, and Dawn Luch. Sorry if I made a mess of that one. Is that it?
That's all.
Quick.
Thank you much.
What was the date of that? What kind of day of the week is that?
Monday.
It is a Monday.
Oh, okay, cool.
Is that at 7? Is that at 7?
It's supposed to be 6:30, they are gonna get here at 7. I mean 6.
So the hearing,
It's at 6:30,
okay,
so
thank you.
Oh.
my bad. 'cause this was for,
Alright. Great, anything else? We have minutes, you put minutes in our, we have to approve minutes? So, who do I get to blame for typing Mike's name wrong? Who do I get to blame for typing out Mike's name wrong? Look at
Or
Mike's
do we
name.
reject the minutes because that's
oh,
spelling error? Huh?
Yes, well, no, we have to do it as corrected.
Yeah, I read these.
You good with them?
We getting a
Did you
new one?
read them? Did you read them already?
Are we getting a new one? Because of
Yes.
Mike's name.
Yeah, make a motion to approve the minutes as corrected. Mike's last name with a B.
Has an E.
It's okay,
two E's.
it's okay. I made a motion, anybody want to second it?
I'll second.
Yep.
All those in favor? Alright. So yeah, we'll initial it next meeting, we'll initial it. Alright, anything else? We got it. That's all you got for us over there?
Yes.
Ladies, yeah, cool. I got a bunch of stuff for you. Oh, so I was going through some ordinances. There was, you have a subdivision ordinance, that's like real brief. And it talks about a fee schedule approved by the board for a subdivision. Doesn't say select board, it doesn't say planning board, it says board. But anyways, whereas an ordinance, my guess is it probably really ought to be the select board. Planning board has already done this, I think they revised their fee schedule, cause they have their planning regulations. So that they have the fee schedule and they just updated this last year, recently,
Oh, no, it was a few years ago.
a few years ago.
Yeah.
Um,
Cause we were still meeting at the library.
so I mean, this is approved by us, but they haven't, this has never been actually, I think, formally approved by the board. And I think it just makes sense to do that.
And that's the ordinance that you guys are using?
Well,
That
no,
goes
they,
into
this
it,
goes
the
into their
separate-
regulations, so
Okay.
they have regulations, but that's
Okay.
where this appendix C is located. And
Okay.
so actually on the fee schedule that I have, I actually am putting down for subdivision Cs, C Schedule C and planning board regulations.
Okay,
And but that way it's still on our list and then we can just, if they wanna update them, cause they can go to the towns and we can just update this as we see fit. But I wanted to make this kind of legal, so I make a motion to approve appendix C fee schedule of the planning board regulations.
Second.
All those in favor? And I'm just gonna, do you want us to sign it or just initial it or?
It's up to you. You can do whatever you want. If you'd like, I can do one as.
we probably should sign it. don't you
That's what I was
think?
saying.
Oops.
Oh, don't worry about it.
Lines with names underneath it and all that fun stuff.
Yeah,
Alright.
probably, just the date,
I left the space there, Laura.
yeah. Oh, you're so funny.
Did everybody get
Chip.
this?
I'm sorry, you might wanna date it since there's been a couple years difference between the time frame. So that you know that when it was approved, in case anything comes up, they might have fell in between the time periods of the approval and the
It's dated.
issuance, oh it is, okay, I mean signature dated too though.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Did you guys get the email from Steve Connolly? About Lebanon was under assessed on the school, did you give that to everybody or did I just get it or? Treasurer may have done that, did you get it, is that?
Yeah, I have it.
Okay,
What was
I just wanted to make sure you guys were aware.
Yep.
It's no impact. It was
Oh, yeah.
It was $1,800 that something got screwed up and so they actually under assessed us $1,800. But they're not gonna go after the money, so. It's a non-issue for us,
Yeah.
so.
One of the times we get-
I just wanna make sure you guys saw it. Looking through. This is the actual complaint form for the bunnies that the code enforcement officer has.
I know nothing about bunnies.
there are some loose bunnies that are invading a neighbor's property
Okay.
and eating her plants and
Wild bunnies?
no, I don't know, and they're just kinda hanging out under her pool or under her deck, or I don't know, and going under the fence and yep, so we're having, so.
Wouldn't that be a code enforcement?
And that's actually, this is the one, I just got this, cause this, she actually, I must have filled this out in 6-6,
Yeah,
but this is the one that Mike had referenced. And he's referred it to the ACO,
well, that's what I was just gonna say, shouldn't that be an ACO issue rather than a
so,
CEO issue?
I mean, again, and I don't even think it's that issue, so. I'm gonna sign it that we reviewed it. What is it, today is 15?
15.
We'll see if you can just kind of file that whatever you wanna file in the bunny folder.
There's a founder.
I came back to the referendum. So I went out, I did a quick check with Bernstein to make sure they said, cause they said it, I couldn't appropriate in future years. They agreed, so I don't know how we've done the ambulances and other things that we have, but we, so I changed it. She said it was fine, although she worded it a little bit differently, so essentially what it's shall the town commit to participate in reconstruction, and actually, I think I gotta find out whether it's actually reconstruction or whether it's, I think it's reconstruction is probably the right word, of the New Bridge Road Bridge MDOT project 3713, ID number 02244, expected to be part of MDOT's 2018-19 work plan, including a commitment to participate, including a commitment to fund a 10% share of the total project cost, approximately 1.3 million, and authorize the selectmen to enter an agreement with the states of Maine and New Hampshire and the town of Milton and execute any other documents necessary to accomplish the project. The town share, and then in parentheses, the town share of the project cost is expected to be funded through appropriations of approximately $40,000 in each of fiscal years 2019, 20, and 21. So it's,
Should you put somewhere that it's New Bridge Road so people would know?
yeah,
Does
the
it
New
say
Bridge
that?
Road
Oh, okay.
Bridge.
I didn't hear you say that, so
Yep.
that's okay.
Yeah, right there in the first.
Okay,
Yep. So, and that's why I put the numbers as well, so they can identify it,
yep,
and we're expecting to do the project, so, but we can't just ask for it now, but we say, I wanted to put it out there, that's what we plan to do, so then come 19, when we do $40,000 or 50,000, then 10
Right.
plus the 40,
right,
they'll know what it's about.
Yeah.
So, we can I'll make a copy of this and let you guys actually read it, and then we can, make a motion to put it on the ballot in November at whenever we do that, so. Let's see, not that one, not that one. John O'Donnell got back to me, I copied both you on an email, so he got back, did you, I think you probably should have seen this, cause I forwarded it to everybody, as well as today.
oh, I haven't seen it yet.
Cause I just got it, late last night. Essentially what he's doing is he's looking at a 6-year plan. And it really ends up being money. Money is the bottom line. So to do. So, and I also sent him an email, which I put you guys on a bunch of questions, and there was his answers that I had. One of them was the software question that we got raised, how do we get stuff out of the software? It's essentially, the first 3 years, 4 years maybe are fine based on our current budget amount. We'll actually see it's actually a hair less, because we'll see some savings from getting rid of the trios real estate section. Trio, our real estate is like 2,300 that we're not even using. His is 1,500 a year. So.
So what you're saying we're not using isn't really the real estate collection part?
Well,
It's
the
the
real estate
other-
valuation, yeah, the
It's the-
collection, everything, but it's the one that just says real estate.
Okay,
The billing we use,
yeah,
collections we use.
yeah, well, that's what, when you
But
said
the real
that.
estate just by itself is like $2,300 a year. And we really don't use it.
Mhm.
We don't, it doesn't do any of our calculations, it's we don't really calculate, it doesn't.
Mhm.
We can literally do it on a spreadsheet.
Right,
So, it really comes down to how committed are we to a 6-year plan.
a 6-year contract,
No, he wants to do it, my guess is we wanna do it 2 years at a time.
cause,
But my point is, cause we can't do a 6-year contract, I even
No.
told him we can only do 3 years.
yeah,
And I said maybe even only just 1 year, but I don't wanna. He's thinking 2 years and then 2 years, and then if you have 2 2-year contracts, that's 4 years, that's all the field work. So
How's
essentially,
that
what
gonna
he's,
be able to read that tomorrow?
yeah, so essentially you've got 2017, 18, 19, and 20 is field work.
Mhm.
Or if it's fiscal year, it's the following, but
Right.
you know what I'm talking
Right,
about,
yeah.
this coming year.
Yeah.
So that part is what's basically budgeted now, and it's actually be a little bit less, cause we'll see savings on the,
no,
well, we'll see savings on the trio, on the trio by getting rid of the trio side.
Mhm.
The next year, then there's 2 more years after that, so that's the field work done. Then you have a year where he does a lot of sales analysis and develops all the schedules.
Mhm.
As far as for how to value everything. And then the last year is actually the biggest year because you have hearings and reviews. And that's basically labor because you have, and it's kinda hard to know how much that's gonna be.
Mhm.
Because he's figuring it's gonna be high because Lebanon hasn't had real evaluations forever. So there's
Right.
gonna be a lot of questions, and so there may be a lot of people that come in and want answers and questions, and because that's part of the review process before we actually turn the switch.
Mhm.
We give people a chance to come in and ask questions, and they have to then review what they have and go back and forth, and so that's somewhat labor intensive, which there's a cost to that. He's got right now, that's probably close to 88,000, just that 1 year. Yep, which is double, you know, so, you know, will it be lower? It could be. Part of that is also mailings, which, you know, so I mean, again, under the assessing budget, can that be used under the government budget for postage and stuff like that? Certainly.
I don't think so.
But I mean, that's gonna be, we have to get I don't even know if I'm gonna be here in 6 years. You don't even know if you're
Well,
gonna
I
be here.
don't either,
So, but my point is that, and what we just did last year probably isn't gonna count for anything. Just, it is what it is.
Mhm.
We can keep going the way we're going, small cape, large cape. But eventually that's gonna catch up to us.
Mhm.
And if we ever have problems, it's gonna have a real hard time holding up a court. It just is, it's just, you can't.
Right,
So that's not the way it's done anymore. So I think we gotta go with this, just to cover our own butts. And it's fair as well. But it's gonna take time, but we have to hopefully understand it's a 6-year process, I think this maps it out. So, and I think obviously 2 years and then 2 years, you know, I don't know if we do 3 years. I don't know if maybe we do 3 years first. I don't know, I just, we can talk about that, I'll let you guys look at this stuff, I'll make copies and let you look at this, and if you have questions, we can get back. Obviously, it'll help us with this commitment as well if we get them on here. So that's, you know, so that's helpful as well. Because he's included that in the work. Because there's a valuation piece and there's also the assessing piece, so he's also, and he split it up, he's basically put $10,000 for the assessing. So that's like the regular assessing job. And then there's the valuation part of it, going out and doing all the field work, measuring and all that kind of stuff, which is another component. So, you know, again, I don't think we need a lot of office hours. That was my questions that were in here, so you don't need that, but that's,
I'll make a copy. You want one?
I'm just gonna make them up real quick.
huh?
I just have to print some more.
Okay, if you wanna make a copy of this too, this is the email.
So one for everybody?
That one you may have to do a color so you can see the difference, because he put, you know. you know, there's not a lot of people that are gonna do the valuation side, I mean, yeah, the assessing side, we could do it, so I mean, you know, that one we could go out to bid if we wanted to define somebody just to do that small assessing piece, but and quite frankly, you don't need 40,000 to do small cape, large cape.
That's true.
So, and if that's what we're gonna do, we probably don't even need an assessor, we could do it ourselves, for that matter. Cause we're not doing field work, so, you know, my point is that, I think the idea has come across to do, you know, we're not trained, we're not qualified. I just think it makes a ton of sense, I think it makes a ton of sense to do it right, so that's my thought.
The
Yeah.
little I know about assessing, it seems if Mike give us more information that he has, put it together when he has a new piece of property, it would save a lot of money.
On the measuring side, but I'm not sure, cause it's really more the valuation that has to, and that's where you look at
You
sales.
need all the information he's got to get the valuation.
The valuation, a lot of it is sales data, so some of the field work, yes, but if the assessor has to sign off, he may not go by
No,
drawing
I
somebody gave him.
I don't want him to just take this stuff. He'd have an idea what he's gonna see when he gets there.
No, and I even, one of my questions said is how can we help? As far as the selectmen, the assistant, part of this is data entry, so there'll be, but it doesn't look like there's a lot of
Mike.
data entry.
Mike gives us an occupancy permit, and that's all we got.
Yep. Well, again, there will be procedures, this guy does it all over the place, so if there's procedures that he needs us to have the code enforcement do to make his job easier, we will do that.
That's what I'm trying to say.
So, again, but I don't know what he's used to in Acton or Shapley or Bridgeton or all these other towns that he assesses in. So he obviously knows what works best, cause I'm sure he's dealt with all sorts of different
Right.
CEOs, so we can certainly, you know, work with him on that. So, like I said, you can get this, we don't have to decide that tonight, but if you could look at it and get me, or email me, or let me know questions that I can ask, or his email's on there, you can shoot him a question directly if you want, you know, whatever you wanna be, or just write them down and we'll talk about it Tuesday. And then I maybe I'll do a massy, a big, one email with everybody's questions on Tuesday.
Yeah.
So, something like that.
Well, one thing, I don't know if you got it on there, what we made a mistake with the other guy. I wanna know what we're gonna have when he gets done.
So at the end of the 6 year, if we stay on plan that he's drawn out, okay? In 6 years, every property will be measured, everything will be done correctly as it's done in most of the rest of the state. And we have a really, really good baseline for evaluations. The problem is that we're not in office for 6 years. So I don't know what's gonna happen,
I know, that's.
you know, but we can only go down that road and try to show how important it is to do that. But they could drop a ball in year 5 and, you know, we've wasted a lot of money, but
It won't be wasted because we'll have
we'll
value.
we'll have it, but it has to be used, and
Yeah.
so, yeah, so. All set, thanks.
Well.
So that's that,
I had 3 years for it. I got 4 more years, I'm all right.
Good for you.
Trying to see, I think that might be predominantly most I have. That's somewhere, I'm looking up a lot for somebody, let me look at my list. Oh, I wanted to mention, and congratulate, we actually have 4 firefighters that are graduating tonight, from what I understand, from firefighter 1 and firefighter 2 schools. It's at 7 o'clock, so unfortunately we're here and we're not able to go there, but it's Megan, Dion, Matt Sanborn, Kayla Gary, and Brian's skating. Those are the 4 firefighters that just graduated, firefighters 1 and 2. So I just wanted to put that out.
That's great.
Unfortunately, I did not hear that. I heard that from an alternate source. The other thing is I had a question from a Boy Scout in Lebanon Troop 369. So had reached out to me, and so he had two questions, and I just kind of wanted, and I could have answered him privately, but I thought it would be nice to answer it in a public meeting. And his first question was, what is being done about the roads?
Good question.
So, I don't know whether he's sick of going into potholes with his bicycle or his skateboard. They're not quite skateboard ready. But we just had a meeting about the roads, and we talked about some roads that are gonna be paved. And roads are primarily a budget issue, is a money issue. We can only do roads if we have money, and so we try to do the worst roads each year and try to keep up that way. Unfortunately, we have too many roads and not enough money, so some get worse than others quicker. The winter always does a job on the roads, some years more than others. But that's what we have, a road commissioner who's in charge of the roads, and he just met with us last week to go over the roads. So, and then his other question was, how can young people help? And I guess first I would say that you can certainly reach out. I welcome young residents of Lebanon to ask us their questions. If whether they email them in or whether they reach out to one of us privately, we're certainly open to answering your questions, and I think it's good to have young people involved in town government. That's how things grow, and it's important to be involved. So one way you can help is to be involved. I think that's a help for everybody, to be able to see the young residents involved in town. I know there's community service hours that are needed in a lot of the schools, and there has been talk around the town trying to get more projects that young people can do here in town. Eventually, I'm gonna want us to get much more electronic and getting a lot of documents online. So there might be some scanning, and so maybe I'll reach out to some young kids that are computer savvy and can get some scanning done for us to get files. So I certainly am thinking of activities that young people can do, and we're certainly open to ideas as well.
Absolutely,
Do you guys have anything you wanna add?
yeah. The young people getting involved, absolutely.
And certainly all our meetings are open. If you wanna come to a meeting, you're more than welcome.
Yes.
I think this young kid is Taekwondo or something tonight, so that's why he couldn't attend tonight. So, but anyways, I hope that answers your questions. And what's that? Oh, I sent Tommy an email to start working on a bid for a 1 ton with a plow. And he also wants a sander, which makes sense.
Absolutely.
So I don't know, he and I kind of went back and forth, does it make sense to do a package deal, all 3 items together? Or what I was thinking is maybe just the 1 ton and then the plow and the sander together. Cause a lot of whether Fisher makes both plows and that, I don't know whether that's, I'm not sure which yet, but I pulled up like 4 different.
Before I sign on to buy the truck, I wanna know what's gonna happen, who's gonna drive the truck?
Yep.
I mean,
Yep, no, I agree, we'll have to have a plan. But anyways, I just wanted him to get starting on that bid, cause we have to get that out.
well, we'll bring that up,
Yeah.
somebody takes it home at night.
What, does somebody, is what you're saying, or you want somebody to?
I want somebody to.
Yeah. Well, again, maybe the road commissioner may do it, I don't,
No, I mean, I don't wanna leave it up there.
Yep. So, I mean, we can certainly talk about that. We can bring Tommy,
Have a night just for that.
Yeah, we can bring Tommy and talk about. But yeah, so he's working on it, I guess, I found 4 online from different towns. I attached those, so we can take a look at those. So, does that, I think that's it. I guess we got several executive sessions, go ahead. Oh, thank you. So, hold on, I gotta try my,
As
you
we
off-
swing the
are you off
camera a little
camera?
more.
She's off camera, so,
Oh.
everybody, oops, wanna introduce
Keep going,
our
keep
new-
going.
I wanna introduce our new, we gotta find the Zoom, where's the Zoom? There it is,
We're zooming?
I don't know how to zoom, it's not zooming, oh, there it
Oh,
is.
hopefully.
There you go, everybody, that's our new administrative assistant, that is Jenny. Alright, now that I've embarrassed her enough,
Yes, thank you.
back off and, oops, go back the other way. And that's over there, that's our stand-in person that was doing it for quite a while, turning her, yeah, there we go, I got you. Okay, screwing the silt in it back, we don't wanna see the turn, here we go.
Something here.
He's coming in, I think, to.
Alright, we have several executive sessions to go into. So before I do that, because I gotta turn off the video, I thought I had a couple of quick announcements and then we can get Paul in here. Tomorrow at 4 o'clock, we're doing a quick,
Something.
not even celebration, but we're recognizing the 250th anniversary of the town because it happens on the 17th. And tomorrow is the 16th, it's the closest day. The actual big celebration isn't until July 4th weekend, but that's what we're doing it tomorrow. There may be press here, we've reached out to the press, a little press opportunity, a little bit of publicity to try to get it going. That's the purpose of it. So the more the merrier, tomorrow at 4 o'clock.
Okay.
We have a meeting on Tuesday, this coming week, and we have a meeting on Thursday this coming week. So,
Is one of them with the firemen?
To the fire station.
Tuesday is, Tuesday is a school board member is coming in, and then we're going to a meet and greet at the fire station with all the responders.
Okay,
And Thursday, so that meeting will be short, we'll be done by 6 or earlier, cause we gotta be at the fire station at 6.
okay.
Thursday is, I'm not even sure what's on the agenda, do we really have anything? I think that's a little open right now, but we'll figure it out. So, we may very well do transfer station on next Thursday since it didn't happen tonight. So we'll reschedule that for next
Tuesdays,
Thursday.
at 6 o'clock, we go to the.
No, it's Tuesday's 5:15 here, but then we're gonna stop at like 5 minutes to 6, and then we're gonna drive down to the fire station. I think that's all I got for announcements. Did you
yeah.
guys have anything? Now that I've hogged you all the time.
That's okay. I did meet with Jordan and Dale last, I think it was Friday, I don't know what day it was, but anyway. We talked about the check policy, payment by check policy. You know, a lot of residents aren't happy, they have to put their license and all that. So Jordan did call BMV, motor vehicles, and they don't require that. So we talked about, we'd like to change it to, on the checks must have your physical address and your phone number, current phone number, and take off, driver's license number and expiration. So I just wanted, permission to do that, and then somebody will write up a new form, whoever.
Okay.
Jordan, we couldn't find where this was done, so I don't know.
Alright, that's fine.
Um,
Do you have a problem with that, Paul?
you know,
Do you have a problem with that?
No,
no, so
Yeah.
that
I mean,
was
we have
just
to, we'll make a motion when we sign this thing.
Yep, but I just
But for
wanna
right
see if
now,
it was
sure,
okay.
Sure, yeah,
Alright.
yeah, go for it.
So I'll give this to you, and I don't know who has the policy, what computer it's in, I don't know. But you might have to do
We may
it
have to
all
redo
over.
it all over again.
Do some research.
Yeah, little research. Yeah, that's good for now.
Sure.
So, yeah, I gotta do that. Check policy, he checked BMP, yep, that's good for now, yeah, that's fine.
Do you have anything?
no, I'm all set.
Okay. Paul, do you know the code for your executive session?
Personnel.
Okay,
She wrote it, somebody wrote it here.
Yeah, I
Four
have
oh
Jenny
five,
write it
six
on
eight,
there.
oh, okay,
Oh, you did?
on our paper, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not on mine. I wanna make a motion to
But
go into
yours wasn't
executive
on
session, for personnel matters per one
Yes.
MRSA 4056A.
Yep.
All those in favor?
Sorry, yes.